though there were real doubts whether or not Bond should be brought back after the Cold War had ended, none of these doubts existed anymore once the ever-popular GoldenEye was released. It now seemed more relevant than ever to have the suave and sophisticated secret agent back at his prime during the 90s. And what better way than to use the biggest action hero for video games? GoldenEye 64 became one of the best-selling and most critically acclaimed Nintendo 64 games of all time, and to this very day it's still widely recognized to have revolutionized first-person shooters for consoles. With so much incredible success for Bond again, the studios really pressured the producers to quickly start production on the next film, so it was only a matter of time before Bond would make his return to the field.
Yesterday is a memory. Today is history. Tomorrow is in the hands of one man.
Bond. You know the rest. Well, this is my second one, and I had to, when I came to GoldenEye, I had to kind of just forget all the other ones that had gone before me. Having acknowledged them and respected them, certainly Connery's work, and then just push that aside and say, this is where we start from. This is the beginning of a new generation.
So GoldenEye was an absolute massive success. Where do you go from there with this new generation of Bond films? Well, for the first time the producers went with a title that had absolutely no connection to Ian Fleming. Tomorrow Never Dies. Originally the title was intended to be Tomorrow Never Lies, but because of a typo of an early script, the title Tomorrow Never Dies was adopted. I personally feel that Tomorrow Never Lies would have sounded a bit more Bondian, packed with a little more intrigue, and it would have been in context with the film's story a little more as well. But then again, slapping the word die into the title of a Bond film seemed to be the way to go. GoldenEye's director Martin Campbell was asked back to direct, but he declined. He seemed to really only do these films when the franchise was in desperate need of saving, and the series was in pretty great condition, so no need for him now. Instead, Canadian director Roger Spottiswoode was brought in and held the responsibility to continue Bond's popularity in the 90s. David Arnold was now brought in to take over from Eric Serra and arrange the score for lots of future Bond films. I kind of consider him the John Barry of my generation. The soundtrack he gave the modern day Bond films are just fantastic, and this first one is no exception. So the film opens up at an arms bazaar on the Russian border, which is kind of presented as a Walmart where terrorists can do shopping for weapons of mass destruction. The place is under close surveillance by MI6 as M, alongside some other MI6 officials, are following along as they guide their agent in the field through his reconnaissances. And that agent, of course, is Bond.
Filthy habit.
Immediately the filmmakers remind us again that we're in the modern day of the 90s now, as smoking is considered as passé as slapping women on their asses. Ah, the 60s, simpler times. Immediately we are thrown into some action filled with lots of shooting and lots of explosions. The Admiral back at MI6 has seen enough and he orders a nearby vessel to launch a missile targeting the arms bazaar. So Bond is ordered to get out of there, but he points out that there are 2 nuclear missiles mounted onto one of the fighter jets, so firing that missile to destroy the place may not exactly be the best idea. Unfortunately, the missile can't be destroyed anymore as it is too far out of range, and thus a thrilling race against the clock ensues as the missile gets closer to the bazaar and the folks at MI6 are all holding their breaths as they wonder what the hell Bond is doing. So Bond steals the fighter jet with the nukes and makes an incredible narrow escape with the Bond theme blazing out as the missile reaches his target area, while everybody at MI6 assumes that Bond didn't survive. Bond then gets into a dogfight with another fighter jet while also being gagged by a co-pilot in his jet, and all of this stuff is just great. Of course he manages to solve things in typical Bond fashion.
backseat, driver. White Knight to White Rook. I've evacuated the area. Asked the Admiral where he'd like his bombs delivered.
It's honestly one of the best pre-title sequences in the series and succeeds so well in pumping you up for the adventure ahead. We get into the opening titles and this time we enter a psychedelic world of mass media and information, which is one of the central themes of this movie. And although I like the visuals of everything going on here, I'm not a massive fan of Sheryl Crow's title song.
Darling, I'm killed. I'm in a puddle on the floor, waiting for you to return.
As far as I'm concerned, pretty much every Bond fan will tell you that the song Surrender by K.D. Lang used for the closing credits is way superior and should have been the main title song.
Tomorrow never dies. Surrender. Tomorrow will arrive. On time, I'll tease it.
Portions of that song are even incorporated in the soundtrack of the movie, so it was definitely intended to be the main theme. It's such a shame they went with Sheryl Crow instead, probably thinking she would sell better. You can find tons of clips on YouTube where fans have put K.D. Lang's song over the opening titles, and believe me, it just fits so much better. It's a real missed opportunity. Pretty much the entire setup of the plot is laid out to us straight away. A British Navy ship by the name of the Devonshire gets into a conflict with Chinese fighter jets who claim their ship is sailing within Chinese territorial waters, so they warn them to leave. According to the British, however, they have gone mad, as they clearly are in international waters. Well, turns out someone is using a GPS encoder to fuck up their location fix to deliberately cause tension between the two nations. A stealth ship shows up and they launch a remote-controlled driller into the British ship, causing them to believe that the Chinese are attacking them. And to make it more believable, the crew gets killed with Chinese weapons. At the same time, they also fire a missile and destroy one of the Chinese fighter jets to make them believe they are being attacked by the British. And as the Devonshire sinks to the bottom of the ocean, they steal one of the missiles from the ship. So a third party is trying to provoke World War III by setting up two important nations against each other? Hasn't that been done before? Well, yeah, this is the third time a Bond film has a plotline like this. This was first seen in You Only Live Twice, when Spectre was trying to instigate a war between the Americans and the Russians. And then it was done again in an even better way in The Spy Who Loved Me. And now here we are again, only this time with the UK and China. The motives of the villain doing this, however, are a bit updated, because we are introduced here to the man responsible, Elliot Carver, played by Jonathan Pryce, a medium baron and our main villain of the movie. Carver is the CEO of the Carver Media Group, a huge media empire for TV, satellites, radio and the newspaper Tomorrow, hence the title of the film. So by starting tension between two nations and setting them on the brink of war, Carver is the first to spread the news around the world and is ultimately in it for the power of high television ratings.
I want full newspaper coverage. I want magazine stories. I want books. I want films. I want TV. I want radio. I want us on the air 24 hours a day. This is our moment. And 1 billion people around this planet will watch it, hear it, and read about it from the Carver Media Group.
I like the whole media concept behind the character of Carver. It's very much of the times, and heck, it will probably be even more relevant today with the internet and the enormous influence that social media has on our daily lives and society in general. So we move to Bond, who is of course out banging a hot Danish chick before getting the call that he's needed.
You always were a cunning linguist, James. Don't ask. Don't tell.
The movie moves along with a pretty fast pace. Of course, the British immediately want to retaliate by attacking the Chinese, but M has her doubts about the Chinese being out to start a Third World War, and she wants to investigate first. And again, we get a great moment showing us why a female M just works so well in the modern world.
With all due respect, Em, sometimes I don't think you have the balls for this job.
Perhaps. But the advantage is I don't have to think with them all the time.
So M is given 48 hours for her investigation and she puts 007 on the job. The mission briefing is this time taking place in M's car cruising through the streets of London, which is something we haven't really seen before and makes for a nice change of the usual office scene. Because Carver was able to put out the news of the situation so fast, suspicion is immediately casted upon him and Bond is sent out to Carver's satellite launch party in Hamburg to investigate. M also encourages Bond to use Carver's wife and pump some information out of her, knowing that Bond has had a relationship with Carver's wife in the past. This is pretty contradicting to how we saw her being introduced in GoldenEye.
Because I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur.
We saw her being extremely dismissive about Bond's ways of charming and using women, but now, just one film later, she pretty much instructs him to use his penis to get some information that could help prevent World War III. Right, on to Hamburg to pump away then. Upon arriving, Bond meets up with Q to receive his new gadget-laden car, and here's my pick for one of the best deleted scenes that really should have been kept in the movie.
Right, now pay attention, 007. Your new car.
Jaguar?
Wrong assignment.
It's such a shame that little moment was deleted. I thought it was great. So once again, Bond receives a BMW. During the previous episode, I already talked about not being a fan of Bond driving a BMW during this period of the series, and this time it's a standard family car sedan, which is even less Bondian. However, this time at least the actual gadgets are used, and I really love all the features this car has. Bond receives a cell phone, which is gadget-laden in its own right, but it also serves as a remote control to drive the car around. It's a really great idea, and you know that this time at least the gadgets of the car are gonna have an actual payoff. So Bond starts his investigation at Carver's satellite launch party, and just a little bit of trivia here, Carver's PR girl is played by a very well-known Dutch celebrity by the name of Daphne Dekkers.
Excuse me, Mr. Carver.
Yes.
This is the new banker, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Even to this very day, whenever a new Bond film is about to be released, she is always invited to Dutch talk shows to talk about her brief little part in Tomorrow Never Dies. And she's still extremely proud of it, even though she's really only in a blink it and you miss it type of part. Anyway, it's also here that we are introduced to our main Bond girl, Wei Lin, played by Michelle Yeoh, and by the fact that the story is centered around preventing a war between the British and the Chinese and her being Chinese and stuff, you can pretty much guess from the get-go like, oh, she's a Chinese secret agent also sent out to investigate Carver. I really like her in this, she's great. Carver's wife, on the other hand, is played by Terry Hatcher and she isn't. Originally, Monica Bellucci was considered for the part of Paris Carver, and I think she would have been absolutely stunning as Paris and would have been so much more exotic and believable as a former flame of Bond. Terry Hatcher, however, is just far from interesting and has zero chemistry with Brosnan. That may have something to do with the fact that Brosnan and Hatcher apparently didn't really get along behind the scenes. Anyway, she seems to be in conflict with herself whose side she's really on, because to Bond she's all bitchy like, because when it comes to a choice between you and Elliot, I made my bed. You don't sleep in it anymore. But then to her husband, she goes, I told you, he's just a banker. I met him in Zurich. She covers for Bond anyway, so really at this point there's no real way in knowing if she's on the side of her current rich and powerful husband or her dangerous and excitedly handsome ex-boyfriend. She probably isn't even sure herself. Anyway, Bond being Bond starts poking the bee's nest a little bit by asking questions about the disappeared British Navy ship. And because of that, he immediately gets suspicion casted upon him and is brought to a dark room and is beaten by a bunch of Carver's security guards. Speaking of Carver's security, his lead henchman is a guy named Stamper, played by German actor Götz Otto, who is another one in the long line of muscular blonde henchmen, although this one actually dyed his hair blonde, like Super Saiyan blonde for the part. But other than that, he's pretty generic. Anyway, Bond beats the security guys and gets a nice first payback to Carver.
Go for freedom at every turn. Yeah,
Station break.
that is the goal of the Carver Media Group Network. What's happening?
We've lost power. We're off the air.
So with Bond having caused a lot of trouble already and having beaten up the security guys, he knows that Carver is bound to send some hitman to his hotel and he's out there drinking vodka awaiting whoever Carver will send to him. Brosnan just looks the absolute business again. To me, looks-wise, he's just so Bondian, which is still one of the strong points to his Bond. Instead of a hitman, it turns out Carver has sent Paris to his room instead, hoping to get some information out of Bond. So, Paris is supposed to be a former lover of Bond, someone he genuinely had feelings for or at least cared about in some capacity in the past. In my episode on A View to a Kill, I talked about Bond meeting a KGB agent he had apparently met in the past and how it would have been so much better had this been the actual KGB agent that he met in the past, Anya Almasova from The Spy Who Loved Me. Here, they have such a missed opportunity again. My fellow Bond reviewer, Haphazard Stuff, talked about bringing back Natalia Semyonova for this part instead, and I completely agree with him. Much like in GoldenEye, the filmmakers tried to reach Bond's deeper emotions and do so in just one little scene in the entire movie.
Did I get too close for comfort?
Yes.
It just falls completely flat once again. I mean, imagine how much more powerful this scene would have been had this actually been Natalia. Having them give in and kiss each other again would have worked so much better because we actually know about their history together in the previous film. Instead, we get this, and not a single audience member is actually gonna care about this Paris or this supposed history that Bond shared with her. It's just one of the elements of the film that had a lot of potential but doesn't really work at all. So Paris apparently picked Bond's side and gives him information about infiltrating Carver's newspaper factory. So that's where Bond goes next. Thanks to Paris's intel, he learns the easiest way to get into the building. Bond soon sneaks his way into the most important room and discovers a safe containing a little red box with a GPS encoder. It's the device that was obtained by Carver's cyber geek Gupta, and he used it to guide the British Navy ship off course and ultimately instigate the tension between them and the Chinese. As Bond is about to exit, he soon discovers that Wei Lin is also present, apparently also after a GPS encoder. Unfortunately, she didn't get information to the easiest way in, and she sets off the alarm, causing all the guards to discover Bond and shoot at him, while Wei Lin is just casually escaping the complex, which I always really liked. Bond makes a pretty amusing escape and soon gets back to his hotel room. As he enters, he hears the sound of a TV news broadcast reporting the death of Paris Carver, who he soon finds killed on his bed. Carver's enormous influence in the media is demonstrated in the best way during this scene, because I love how the subtle little news broadcast is brought into the scene and explains how Bond's body was found next to Paris's body right when the hitman shows up. Again though, this would have been even more powerful had this been Natalia lying on the bed there. You know, a character we actually got to know and got to care about. Apart from that, all of this is great, and the weird professional German hitman Dr. Kaufman really is a highlight.
I am an outstanding pistol marksman. Take my word for it, yeah?
So Bond finds himself cornered into a tight situation with no real way to save himself out of this. Meanwhile, Carver's goons try to get into Bond's car to get to the GPS encoder that he has stolen. Luckily though, the car has special armor and electrocutes those who touch it, and even sledgehammers and gunshots are rendered useless against the car. So Dr. Kaufman orders Bond to open up his car, so he gets out his cell phone and we get one of the best moments in the series.
Recall 3. Send.
Wait! I'm just a professional doing a job.
Me too.
It's one of the rare moments where Brosnan really shines as a believable professional killer, and he's absolutely fantastic when it does happen. So after that, Bond uses his cell phone to control his car and jumps into the back seat, and we get one of the set-piece action scenes of the movie, the car chase in the car park. It's a real highlight, and it's very ambitious to have Bond drive his car while he's in the back seat while all of Carver's goons try to stop him. The only thing I never got is how all of a sudden the car seems to get damaged by all the bullets now. Like a moment ago the guards couldn't even do anything to the car with a sledgehammer, and now all the bullets just easily break the armor. Does the special armoring stop as soon as Bond is driving the car or something? Why? Other than that, the scene is spectacular. We get rocket launches flying through the car, the tires getting popped and Bond inflating them again using his gadgets, along with using a drill to cut through a metal rope. All of this is lifted even more with David Arnold's great soundtrack. In the end, Bond jumps out of his car again while all the goons follow his car up to the rooftop as Bond drives it off there and makes it land straight into a car insurance company. It's all great fun. So with Bond having obtained the GPS encoder, he moves to a US Army base in the South China Sea. Much like the plot, another similarity with You Only Live Twice and The Spy Who Loved Me is that Bond is seen wearing his Navy uniform again, which we've never seen since as of yet. Joe Don Baker makes his return from GoldenEye in the role of CIA agent Jack Wade, and he is as amusing as ever, even though he's not really in this much. Using the GPS encoder, Bond finds out the real location where the Devonshire has sunk, and he's brought to the place in a pretty impressive skydiving scene. Bond soon finds the sunken Navy ship, and while he's there, he runs into Wei Lin again. How did she end up here though? Bond was the only one who got the GPS encoder from that safe in Hamburg, and she was there too, but went away empty-handed. Yet she just found the Devonshire anyway. Asian technology, man, they're always ahead. There is a brief moment of Bond and Wei discovering that one of the missiles has been stolen, which we as the audience have already found out within the first few minutes of the film. Bond and Wei briefly get trapped into the ship but manage to make an escape. As they reach the surface again, they are captured by Stamper and his crew, and then Bond and Wei are handcuffed to each other.
You'll have to admit though, we seem to have developed a certain attachment to each other.
The pair is then brought to Saigon, Vietnam, where there is another one of Carver's media buildings. Bond and Wei are brought in as captives, and Carver instructs Stamper to torture Bond. His other henchman, Gupta, the cyber terrorist, has little to do in this movie and is forgotten pretty much directly after watching this film. He's portrayed by the magician Ricky Jay and would originally be throwing cards in this scene and use them as weapons. I never seen anyone throw cards in the way that guy can do. I mean seriously, look up his card manipulation skills on YouTube. The guy's insane, it's absolutely mind-blowing. It's such a shame that aspect of his character was completely dropped, and now he's just that fat IT guy who doesn't really do much. Stamper can't get to the torturing part either, as Bond and Wei soon take care of a guard and shoot the crap out of the room and make their escape on the big Carver banner in a nice looking stunt. And I'm not saying Bond needs to be tortured in every film or anything, but when they set it up in this way, you kind of expect or hope to see how Bond is gonna save himself out of this one, but instead they just shoot the crap out of everyone and escape. It's kind of a shame. When they're back outside again, they aren't immediately out of danger though, as Carver's goons are soon after them again, and they steal a motorcycle, entering the second big set-piece action scene of the film. Much like with the car park chase, they give the scene an ambitious gimmick, this time by still having Bond and Wei Lin handcuffed together, causing them to be more creative in their ways of driving and work together with the steering and the operating of the clutch. It's really inventive, and the scene itself of them driving around over all the rooftops while escaping the helicopter shooting at them and being pretty vulnerable, it's all pretty fantastic stuff, and the stunt work is another highlight to the film. There are definitely some more unrealistic parts to this chase though, like having the helicopter hovering while being tilted forward, which would never really be possible in real life, but in the way it's all executed, it's very seamless, and the scene makes for one of the most memorable action scenes of the film. After the whole chase though, Wei Lin uses her earrings to free herself from the handcuffs. Couldn't she have gotten out those earrings, before getting on that bike and struggling so much to survive together? It could have saved them a whole lot of trouble. Anyway, I think Wei Lin is definitely among the best Bond girls in the series, and she's easily the one that's more than capable of taking care of herself and kicking some ass, like is demonstrated in the next scene, where Michelle Yeoh uses her karate skills. She did all the fighting and stunt work herself, by the way, and she absolutely shines. You can fully believe that you won't be able to beat this chick if you would ever end up in a fight with her. She's like a female Jackie Chan. The part that follows, where it's revealed that this is actually one of the Chinese Secret Service hideouts, is really amusing. There's a ton of gadgets showing up, including a new watch and an updated Walther P99 that replaces the PPK from now on, and also in Brosnan's future films. I also thought that the bit where Bond accidentally touches the statue was hilarious.
It's invisible to radar, but not the human eye.
very novel.
It's like Brosnan wasn't made aware during filming about this little prop. He genuinely seemed startled when he touches it. It's hilarious. And us Die-Hard fans always like to point out the fault in the joke where Bond doesn't recognize the Asian characters on the keyboard, even though when You Only Live Twice he stated this.
Instant Japanese. You may need it.
You forget I took a first in Oriental languages at Cambridge.
It goes to show that us fans are sometimes even more knowledgeable about these little tidbits of history of the character than the filmmakers themselves are. Anyway, Bond and Way figure out that Carver must have a stealth boat which he used to cause attention between their respective countries. So they inform their governments about their suspicions of this and set out to locate the stealth boat. And I think it's here where Tomorrow suffers from the same problem as The Living Daylights in the way that the movie kind of sinks in near the end of the film and kind of drags on, not managing to keep the final moments of the film really interesting. So Bond and Way soon locate the stealth boat and start infiltrating it. However, Way soon gets herself captured and Bond for a while manages to make the villains believe that he got killed. This does feature what I think is by far the best moment that Jonathan Pryce gets.
Pathetic.
It's a moment that always gets me laughing, like pause-worthy laughing out loud laughing. One final motivation of Carver for instigating this war is also revealed.
What do you get?
Me? Oh, nothing. Just exclusive broadcasting rights in China for the next 100 years.
And to add even more tension, Carver also plans on using that missile he stole and fire it in Hong Kong to stir things up even more. Bond soon reveals that he's still alive and tries to trade Wei Lin for Gupta, who Carver kills anyway. They should have just kept his card throwing skills in the film. I mean, I would have shot the guy too, since he doesn't really do anything useful in the film now. What soon follows is a lot of machine gun firing, explosions, and Michelle Yeoh kicking some more ass. But other than that, the climax is pretty standard and doesn't reach that same level of momentum that the car park and bike chases managed to reach for this film. Maybe it's the whole execution, or because the film set used here is not very interesting or memorable for that matter. Anyway, Bond soon manages to take care of Carver.
You forgot the first rule of mass media, Elliot! Give the people what they want!
And now there's just a small fight between Bond and Stamper left, while Wei Lin gets dropped into the water. Meanwhile, the stealth ship's presence is made known to the British Navy and they start attacking the ship, raising the stakes a little bit. The same holds for Bond placing an explosive on the stolen missile while fighting off Stamper. Just more attempts of adding a race to the clock element to the scene, but it's nothing that really puts you on the edge of your seat anymore at this point. I think the film could have really done with a better climax. Of course, in the end, Bond manages to save Wei Lin underwater as the explosive goes off, so the stealth ship is destroyed, Carver is killed, and a third world war is prevented. Of course, Bond and Wei are making out while the Navy ship is searching for them. Not that there ever really was any sexual chemistry between them in the film, apart from a brief glimpse in a hideout or a little bit of close contact during that shower scene, but audiences expect them to hook up, so they do. It's all pretty standard. And on that note, the film comes to an end. Tomorrow Never Dies is a typical 90s action movie in every sense of the meaning. It relies a lot on great action set pieces that take priority over plot or character development. That's the thing with this film. Pretty much the entire plot is explained to us within the first few minutes of the film, and we just wait for Bond to catch up and prevent the Third World War from happening and save the day. But you don't really watch this film for its inspiring story, because it's really nothing new, but you watch this for its action. And let me tell you, the action is great and definitely easily capable of competing with other action movies of the time. The spectacular pre-title sequence, the BMW car park chase and the motorbike rooftop scenes are all memorable and are definitely the first things that come to my mind when someone mentions Tomorrow Never Dies. And I think the concept behind Elliot Carver is actually a good idea, but apart from that wonderful Dr. Kaufman scene where his reach in the media is demonstrated in the background, the concept is not really fully utilized, and the storyline could have pretty much been exactly the same had he had a different motivation than television ratings. It just became a more forgettable Bond film to me in the end. The same holds for Paris, being a former lover of Bond. It added absolutely nothing to the story, as the filmmakers just didn't bother to get to the full potential with ideas like that. Now, Wei Lin is the one to remember in this film, and she definitely shines and is another highlight to the movie. She's one of the Bond girls who really seems to be Bond's equal on all kinds of levels, which is pretty rare. But other than that, I would summarize Tomorrow Never Dies as a generic Bond film that has memorable and incredible action scenes, that offers great fun and an enjoyable watch, but fails to really become anything more than that.